Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm discussing Blue Highways by William Least Heat Moon, but also Blue Highways Revisited. So Blue Highways originally came out in 1983 and Revisited came out in 2011. Not the same author, so William Least Heat Moon wrote this travel memoir, and then a father and son went back and recaptured the photography along that route many years later. So 1983, 2011. I'm going to start by talking about the book, and then I'll show you some of the photos from what is effectively a companion book, which didn't used to exist. People would have to go out on the road and try to retrace the steps, or the journey by vehicle. Moon had a modified van where he had just put together some places where he could sleep and store food way before van life. This is the 1980s, no internet, etc. So a really fascinating story, but like any story of a journey, there's not just the internal journey of the author, what he or she is going through, which we'd see in something like Into the Wild, where John Krakauer is writing about Chris McCandless, or Cheryl Strayed writing about her own journey in the Pacific Crest Trail in her book Wild. This one's really interesting because there's so many topics that the book covers. He was inspired by John Steinbeck's Travels with Charlie, which is its own worthy memoir, but not nearly as important as Blue Highways, I would say. I think it's still a good travel book, and interestingly, Heat Moon says that the real travel memoir that Steinbeck wrote was Grapes of Wrath. Different conversation for a different day. But Travels with Charlie doesn't match up to what Blue Highways is trying to do, which is take us on a journey of America, which I guess I will show you what that looks like so you can have some visual representation of the journey, what it looked like. Because he didn't go into the interior of America. He was in Missouri at the time. He had a job at Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri, and he found out that his job was being made redundant, and he was having troubles with his marriage, so he thought this might be a good time to get out on the road. So here you can see the trip, and it's mostly around the edges. And a fascinating journey it was. Talking to people, thinking about things, observing things. The country really is beautiful. It's something I try to emphasize to people, that since my time in Europe, I've come to realize even more how beautiful America was. I don't think I appreciated it as much when I lived in America before moving to Europe. So I'm going to read just some. I mean, the text is 418 pages. I wouldn't say that it reads very easily because he's saying a lot, and it goes in phases. Obviously, as he goes through different parts of the country, there are breaks, and you'll see, for example, east by southeast. So the book, I wouldn't say that the book pulls you along with narrative urgency, but it's still something that I think would interest people who particularly like travel writing, which we haven't covered too much travel writing on the channel, so I'm happy to share this with you all. So one of the things he drove home to me, which I particularly appreciated when I did some road tripping in America myself this summer, was the idea of the independent restaurant that's not part of a chain, that's not part of a large corporation, just owned by a family, and has been bundling along for many years. He developed a system whereby he could know how good the restaurant was, and he talked about calendars. And for those of you who are not from America, there's a tradition of having calendars from a local business where they'll give you a free calendar, and then there's the information about the business somewhere on the calendar. And so Heat Moon would say, if I saw more than one calendar in the diner, this was really good. There is one almost infallible way to find honest food at just prices in Blue Highway America. Count the wall calendars in a cafe. No calendar, same as an interstate pit stop. One calendar, pre-processed food assembled in New Jersey. Two calendars, only if fish trophies present. Three calendars, can't miss on the farm boy breakfasts. Four calendars, try the homemade pie too. Five calendars, keep it under your hat or they'll franchise. One time I found a 6-calendar cafe in the Ozarks, which served fried chicken, peach pie, and chocolate malts that left me searching for another ever since. I've never seen a 7-calendar place. but old-time travelers, roadmen in a day when cars had running boards and lunchroom windows said air cooled in blue letters, with icicles dripping from the tops, those travelers have told me the golden legends of seven calendar cafes. And I think I felt a bit of shame in reading about these places because I think, like many Americans, I have been lulled sometimes into, not sometimes, more than sometimes, into the trap of convenience. So something's close by, it's a brand name that I recognize, I'll eat there. But those choices have reduced so many of the independent eateries that made these blue highways so attractive. And if I haven't mentioned already what is a blue highway, if you look at a traditional map where they have the interstates, the blue highways were marked in blue on this map that Heat Moon was looking at, that were the off the beaten path roads before the interstate system came into existence, which, remember, in was they were only the interstates were built only in the 1950s in America, and these are the huge highways in which he says there's no real life happening. Real life is happening on these smaller highways. And I'm sure that's true in other countries as well. I've observed it myself. The big highways are meant to move people along rapidly. They're not really meant for you to take the time to get to know and just pull over when you're seeing someplace. I'm glad to say, like in places like New Zealand, there's really no such thing as a mega highway. There's so many small winding roads all over that country, and you're able to pull over almost any time. So what about the journey itself? So what is it that you're searching for when you go on a journey? What is it that you're hoping that you'll find? And what's important to realize is wherever you go, you are bringing yourself. So make sure that you're open to finding out what it is that you are actually searching for and relate it to wherever it is that you are contextually, so that you're not losing the opportunity to really grow within yourself and entirely focus on the exterior journey instead of the interior journey. Here he's talking about someone that he met on the road. She longed for the true journey of an Odysseus, or Ishmael, or Gulliver, or even a Dorothy of Kansas, wherein passage through space and time becomes only a metaphor of a movement through the interior of being. A true journey, no matter how long the travel takes, has no end. What's more, as John Le Carre, in speaking of the journey of death, said, nothing ever bridged the gulf between the man who went and the man who stayed behind. There's a lot of beautiful writing in the book, and as someone who does writing myself for a living, Heat Moon is one of these authors, and when you read, you feel totally inadequate. I've mentioned that for several different reviews on the channel, that he when you have someone who takes the time to craft words and sentences, you're reminded of how much work good writing really takes. It's not just something that flows out, whether out of your pen or onto the keyboard. So what are the sort of conversations that you have? And this is going to vary by culture and by personality. If you're the sort of person who can strike up a conversation with a local, with a stranger, in whatever context you might find, I think you're always going to feel enriched. You're going to feel like you've learned something more. It doesn't mean that that person is going to cover everything you could possibly know, or even that they're going to give you what it was that you were hoping to find out. Sometimes you start a conversation with one intention and it ends up going a different way. And you really have to figure out whether you're even able to have that conversation, because sometimes it doesn't make sense to, even as much as you'd like to. When I ran out of questions, the exchange was over. Across the central north, conversations had been difficult to strike up. The people were polite but reserved. Often they seemed afraid of appearing too inquisitive, while at other times they were simply too taciturn to exchange the banalities and cliches necessary to find a base for conversation. So you're not always able to make it happen. And then lastly, from this text, before we switch over to the pictures, the idea of industrialization. And even here in 1983, the sense is industrialization is always going to change dramatically the life that we're used to. And here, this particular woman is talking about the way that they're dragging a particular body of water for oysters. She took a yardstick and broom, crossed them like scissors to show how hand tongs work. They look like 20-foot rakes linked at the center, but it takes the back of Quasimodo to nipper up oysters. Now they have patent tongs, power machines that scoop up the bottom, 10 times as many tongers as dredgers today. Don't ask me what the machines do to the gulch, the beds. Couldn't say, but I know nothing lasts long when you turn the machinery on. She stopped again. Am I reactionary? Heat Moon answers, I don't know. So I think that's worth pondering. What is the price that we pay for convenience or for industrialization? And so often in America, we've not stopped to ask or answer that question. We've simply assumed that progress, faster, better industrialization is by itself better. And I think since 1983, we found out that's not really the case. So what I find wonderful, I don't know that so Blue Highways Revisited, here it says photography by Edgar I. Ailor and Edgar I. Ailor. So Edgar I. Ailor III and his son, the fourth. And they lived near Heat Moon in Missouri. And they mentioned, wouldn't it be great to go back and take photos of all the things that you've done? And Heat Moon said, well, that's fine. I'm not going to do it. So they took on this project and he did it over a number of years, sometimes with his son, who is also a photographer. And it's fascinating to go back, but I don't know that this book makes sense if you haven't read Blue Highways. And what's wonderful too is in the text, they'll put BH and then they'll put a page number. So if you've recently read it as I have, then you're able to cross-reference what you're seeing with what you might have read and not recalled exactly what was going on. So I just picked a few pictures that I thought might be representative to show you. There's lots of really beautiful pictures in the book. Here's a picture of the 1975 Ford van of Heat Moon, which is now in a museum in Columbia at the University of Missouri, because the book became so famous and Heat Moon's journey became so well known that places along his journey got notoriety as people would try to make their own version of the trip, and they would stop in the places that the book had mentioned. And some of the photos look exactly the same. So the photo in Heat Moon's book is the exact same as this one. And it was interesting to see what had changed since 1983 and what had stayed the same. And a remarkable amount of things actually did remain the same. He'll also do before and after. We'll say before and after at the time and then since. So here, for example, you have these three men outside a building that they were stripping to reveal the old log cabin foundations. What was behind, I think it had been covered over by stucco or something else. And then one of the men, so this man who's standing here, you see him over here as well. So all these years later. So he was able to go back and be in contact with these people and ask them, how did the book affect you? How are things different now? Same thing here. See this family outside a general store. And then here, I think, just the mom and one of the children from here who is still alive. So many people had passed on by the time that the father and son had gone to make this version of the book. But it was still so wonderful. And this one was really a fascinating shot as well. This is a sunset from the east coast of the United States. Sorry, this picture here, I know there's another photo over here, but how do you take a sunset from the east coast? And it was just the particular way that Route 58 in North Carolina was that he was able to take it from this angle. So you could see the sunset even though you're on the east coast, right on the water. So really wonderful shot. You've got to have it. Today we're used to digital photography and we're used to trying really hard numerous times with almost no penalty to take the right shot. But back when Heat Moon was on the road, he just had he had a couple Nikons, and he just had to shoot on film. He didn't have digital photography, so he had to hope that he got it right. Some of you watching this are, like me, old enough to have taken our first photos on film, so we didn't grow up with digital. So here, some of the Navajo reservation. For those of you who've never been, Navajo is part of northeastern Arizona, Utah, New Mexico. It's an enormous reservation. they say it's bigger than, I think, 10 states, but all those 10 states are probably in the northeast of the United States. Think like Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut. But still, it's an enormous body of land. It's one of those reservations that I think have had more success than other reservations in the United States. The Navajos seem to do a better job of retaining a lot of their rights. Here again, some beautiful, beautiful land out in Arizona. I know that my showing them on the video doesn't necessarily do them justice, but I'm encouraging you to potentially buy the book or look at it yourself. This is Kendrick Fritz. He's a Hopi man, Hopi, from that tribe, and you can see him there in 1978 and then in 2007, and talks about some of the stories of what had happened in his life and how it was different or similar to what he had told Heat Moon that he'd hoped it would be. There's some beautiful shots in Oregon. Oregon's a very beautiful state. One of my favorite drives in America is the Columbia River Gorge. Just astonishing, and to think of all the people who made that trek out in Oregon. Here's another really beautiful shot of Oregon. This is called Cannon Beach on US 101 in Oregon. Isn't that beautiful? And again, it's not as if the United States has exclusive rights on a great road trip. There's plenty of places you can see all around the world, near whatever country you live in. I'm just pointing out this particular road trip from Heat Moon. Here, the Mississippi River, this enormous river that is so important to life in America, it starts as this very small stream here, Lake Itasca, headwaters of the Mississippi River off of Minnesota Route 200. Heat Moon describes the beginning of the 2,320-mile-long Mississippi River as a 12-inch deep rush of cold clarity over humps of boulders. Definitely someplace I'd like to visit sometime, the headwaters of the Mississippi. I've lived in St. Louis, which has the Mississippi running right by the downtown of that. So I've seen the Mississippi at one of its widest points, lived by the Mississippi at one of its widest points. I'd love to go up to the headwaters. And this is from a stream up in Vermont in New England. So as I said, just a selection of the photos. This text, the photo book, is 322 pages, but an excellent companion, and I think a must. If you've read Blue Highways, you owe it to yourself to pick up a copy of Blue Highways Revisited. I got a used copy, didn't pay too much for it, and I think it would be worth your time. I'll have links to both of those in the description as below, as usual, because that's one of the ways you can support the channel. As you know, hit like, subscribe, share this with people who you know like books about travel. They may not have heard about this, but in all likelihood they have. I'd heard about Blue Highways for years and years and years before I'd read it. It was just on my to-read list, and finally one day I got to read it. And it's a really eloquent, thoughtful travel log, as many travel books are. But I think one that peers into the soul of America potentially more deeply for Americans or people who are interested in America. This might be something really up your alley. So give it a try. If you'd like to support the work, you can do it on a one-time basis. There's links to buy me a coffee or PayPal below. You can hit a super thanks, that little heart icon, and send something through YouTube. If you want to support my work on an ongoing basis, you can join Patreon or YouTube members. You'll get access to videos like this one early and have a chance to converse with me behind the scenes about my selection process, my thought process, what I'm thinking about when I'm reviewing and reading books, and books that never make it here to the channel, but are still books that I'm reading in the background that inform my other things, the other things that I read and think about. Also, as a reminder, in 2024, a portion of proceeds from all these different channels will go to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. It's a charity that helps Palestinian children get medical care who could not otherwise get it. They're a great organization. You can look at the description in the link in the description below to see their work, support them directly or support them indirectly by supporting the channel. And if you'd like to nominate a book for me to review in 2025, you can go to my Amazon wish list, which is also linked below, and pick something, send it to me, and maybe I'll review it. If it's on my wish list, I almost certainly will review it. So that's one way to sort of jump the line on a book that you might be interested in. As always, until next time, enjoy your reading.